That's it, we're on. So this is our first 360-degree filming. And the wind's not too bad, I don't think, so I'll just leave it like that. But James is right, that the closer in you get, probably the better it will be. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our meeting now. Oh, come around. Don't want to make any difference. Apart from the balance, the balance. So, you are going to say, first of all,
how do you measure a leader?
That's a very good question and a poignant, relevant question of the day. I think that really depends on what you're after. But also, it is important to understand that people expect, if you like, a particular type of behaviour to serve a particular interest. So, in the case of Theresa May, why she appears to many people to be strong and stable, even though she may be weak and unstable, is because some people are seeking this sort of protective cloak that they think that the establishment provides them. So many people have an attitude that connects to politics in a way that hopes that those who rule over them will do so in a way that serves the general good of the people, even if it sometimes means that they themselves will suffer as a consequence of that. In the case of Jeremy Corbyn, and actually many leaders on the left, there has been a feeling over a period of years that what you really require is somebody who gathers from the population their attitudes and moods and reflects that back to them. And when I attended meetings over the last 2 summers, the previous 2 summers, when Jeremy Corbyn stood for the leadership of the Labour Party, the thing that was noticeable was that when people went to the meetings and he spoke, they felt that he was speaking and imparting their own views, if you like. This idea, there were some slogans that came out of it, if you went around and asking everybody what they thought Jeremy Corbyn stood for, and they nearly always said hope, integrity, I forgot it last time as well, integrity, hope, and what was the other one? I forgot it now. Hope, integrity, and something else anyway. Honesty, integrity, hope. That was what it was. Honesty, integrity, and hope. So these 3 things represented to them a new type of political life in society. But there are a lot of people who, in the last week, have discussed this question about the Labour Party Manifesto and the leader. So many people, the newspapers, the television and so on, reported that the Labour Party Manifesto, committing to the abolition of tuition fees, committing to nationalisation of the railway system, of the bus companies, of the taking part of the energy companies into public ownership, setting up a national investment bank, pumping in 250 billion investments, and building 1 million homes for the people, including 500,000 council homes and housing association homes. Many people said, and renationalising the railways, extremely popular demands. Most of the population support the demands which Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party are putting to society in their manifesto. But, and this is the peculiarity of our times, isn't it? Some people are saying what you're saying here, or what you raised the issue of here, was, is Jeremy Corbyn a determined leader? Now, there's 2 ways you could look at this, isn't there? Perhaps more than that, but I'll talk about 2. Firstly, there's the one view, this is a man who doesn't really stand up for Britain. After all, he didn't sing the national anthem the first time he was expected to, when he became Labour leader. After all, he was against the Falklands War, he's against the Iraq War, he was against the war in Afghanistan, he was against the war in Kosovo. And even if you think those wars were unjust, unjustified and manipulating public opinion in order to achieve geopolitical or economic and strategic objectives interlinked with the United States government or George W. Bush at the time. Despite all these things, there is a certain layer of the population, generally those who are older and those who feel they have a bit more stability, having worked their lives in order to get to their position, and what little they have they want to hold on to. And they fear that if there is a conflict between capital and labour, between the employers and the workers, that is exacerbated by the election of a Labour government, that their potential relationship with this upper stratum will be sullied somehow. That capitalist society requires people to be subordinate to their bosses, requires people.
Do you think certain press papers make Corbyn not popular?
Well,
like the Mail and the
the idea that they're making, they after all, I remember the day that Jeremy Corbyn was first elected leader of the Labour Party. And we went into the meeting room in the pub just round the corner from Parliament. And at that meeting, Laura Kusenberg, or what's her, how she pronounced her name? Kusenberg? Huh? Kusenberg, well, one or the other. Laura anyway. Lovely Laura, the gentleman says. She said at that meeting, she said, the difficulty will be not convincing these people about how good Jeremy Corbyn is, but how the general public will relate to it. And then from that day onwards, it was as if Jeremy Corbyn had attacked Laura Kusenberg's grandmother, and somehow she had a vendetta from history, which meant she had to launch an attack on Jeremy Corbyn day in, day out, as if it was her life mission. And was it just Laura Kusenberg? No. In fact, there were two independent academic studies which analysed all the reports from a variety of mainstream news media. One published by Goldsmiths, another one by Birkbeck University, I believe. And they both categorically proved that there has been a systematic and organised campaign to denigrate and smear Jeremy Corbyn from the day he stood for leader of the Labour Party. And it increased its intensity every single day since he was elected leader of the Labour Party. And that is a well-verified fact. Now, added to this, and in fact, one of the most interesting parts of that was this: of all the articles studied by these research projects, they showed that only 11% of all the articles about Jeremy Corbyn contained his own views. Only 11% contained his views. Why is it that throughout this period there has been a systematic and organised campaign to denigrate Jeremy Corbyn? The answer to that was revealed this week when the manifesto of the Labour Party, or better said, a draft of it, was leaked to the press. At that moment, it was suddenly revealed why it is that for 2 years and more, there has been an insipid and constant campaign to denigrate and attack Jeremy Corbyn. And that is this: that the policies that Jeremy Corbyn has advocated, that he has got the party to accept in the manifesto, are the most popular policies to be presented by any Labour leader since 1945. The most popular. And this was immediately revealed one day, only one day after the manifesto was leaked. The press was forced to publish the truth, and that is that the majority of the British population, the majority, support the policies proposed in Labour's manifesto. The majority of the population. And so because the press, because the Oxford and Cambridge bods who run these institutions, or perhaps some Russian gangsters or some billionaires from around the world who control the mass media, as well as the institutional anti-socialist bias of the BBC, all of these, they knew very well that the policies that Jeremy Corbyn stands for are popular within the general population, and therefore the objective has been for 2.5 years, nearly 3 now, isn't it? 2.5 years, to try to say you can like the policies but don't like the man. Like the policies but don't like the man. The policies they want to make out are somehow utopian. Why are they utopian? They are utopian because the billionaires who own and control the mass media, the billionaires who generally control, in this sense, control, that their associations, their friends, their family, the people they went to university with, the people they grew up with, the people they went to school with, the people their parents went to school with, and their parents' parents went to school with. All of them were committed and remain committed to attacking and undermining and denigrating socialism because it attacks their interests. The landlords obviously are opposed to rent control. The employers, not all of them, but most of them, particularly the large multinational employers, companies like Facebook and Google that systematically avoid paying taxes, companies like Boots, Marks and Spencer's, Starbucks Coffee, that pay low wages and systematically undermine conditions based on the idea that there's a global marketplace, and if you register your base of your company in Luxembourg or in Ireland or anywhere else overseas, that you can avoid paying taxes, which workers pay at the point when they get their wages. Their taxes are deducted at source. Now Jeremy Corbyn has proposed in the Labour manifesto that there should not only be a national health service, free at the point of demand, from the cradle to the grave, as was the achievement of the 1945 Labour government, the most lasting and popular achievement of any government in British history. That's what the National Health Service is. And now they're proposing like the National Health Service, a national education service from the cradle to the grave, free at the point of use, so anybody at any age can go back to university or can go to university for the first time. Yes, at 85 years of age. Yes, at 90 years of age. And yes, all schooling, all education, adult education, university education, PhD education, all of it should be free to the user to raise the level, the understanding, the knowledge of the general population, and to provide the foundation for a technologically advanced and educated people capable of administering modern technology, science, and developing culture for the benefit of the population. Then they turn around and say Jeremy Corbyn doesn't want a cap on immigration. The truth of the matter is, all Jeremy Corbyn is saying is that we live in a global economic system, a global political system, a global cultural system, and therefore, to the degree that it is humanly possible, we should seek to break down all barriers between human beings across the entire planet. Because if you give way... Sorry? What? I think we're talking about another question there. We're not discussing the Tory party now. Now, if you ask yourself, and many people say Jeremy Corbyn's out of touch. Why is he out of touch? Because he'll talk about the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. They say, oh, don't talk about that, yawn. We've heard that all before. The problem is this: unless you understand the roots of the crisis we have in British society and the crisis we have internationally, in other words, if you want to understand the refugee crisis and the immigration crisis, you have to go back and look at how and why foreign policy has produced the monstrosities that we've seen in inequality across the world. Let me give you one example. Just over here, the other side of Park Lane, up until Regent Street, pretty much down as far as Piccadilly. All that area, you might remember from the Monopoly game, the most expensive area in London, Mayfair and Park Lane, right? £200, no, £300, £350, £400, sorry, my brain. It's owned by the Duke of Westminster. I think it was last month and the month before, the Duke of Westminster died. Very sad. He did a lot of philanthropy. But he had acquired £9,000 million in personal wealth. £9,000 million in personal wealth. Enough to pay 1 million pensioners £9,000. That's what that means, right? Or enough to eradicate starvation in the world. Around 6 million children will die of starvation this year. They could all be saved with the wealth of Duke of Westminster personally owned. But when he died, you'd expect the taxman to knock on the door and say, okay, your children will have to lose some of that money because of inheritance tax. Above a certain amount of property, you pay 40%. I think it's £450,000 at the moment, something like that. 325. Thank you very much for the correction. However, when the Duke of Westminster dies, he passes on £9,000 million without, I don't think there was any taxation. How much did he save on the 40%? £3,000 million lost to the Treasury because of some sweet deals that his accountants are able to secure. That is what Jeremy Corbyn means by the rigging of the economy. We live in a society in which wealth and power has been accumulated over generations. As they said, yay, back to the Middle Ages. And this wealth has been transferred from generation to generation, and power has gone along with this wealth. Wealth and power have a symbiotic relationship together. And therefore, what we have proposed in the manifesto, and that people recognise and support, is that there needs to be a fundamental, revolutionary transformation in the balance of wealth and power in British society and across the entire world. This is not just a British phenomenon. Bernie Sanders is coming to London in the next few days. The same process took place in the United States of America and gave rise on the one side to Bernie Sanders, on the other side to Donald Trump. They both lent on the same angry constituency, which knows deep down in their soul, because of their life experience at work, that the wealth gets transferred from the poor to the wealthy on a daily basis. The wealthiest 1%, their incomes have gone up 5, 10, 15, 20%, depending on what country you're in.
And the same polarisation was visible in France last week, or at least the week before last, when Mélenchon on the one side got nearly 20%. Le Pen got nearly 22%, I believe, the first time round. Second time, 35%. We are witnessing, as in the 1920s and the 1930s, the polarisation of politics to the left and the right. Not because of some maniacs appearing extremist at one pole and the other. It is because the economic foundation of unity of the classes has disappeared. Last week it was reported in the news that in Britain this year real wages are expected to fall between £400 and £1,000 for the average person in Britain. Real wages this year, £400 to £1,000 down. That is why there's a polarisation. And on the other side, London is experiencing the most expensive property prices in world history. And yet, even though there are the highest property prices, the cost of building housing is cheaper than ever before in human history. Technology, science, communication, culture, technique, they are all advancing exponentially. We are in the era of nanotechnology, biotechnology. We have the ability to produce almost any manufactured commodity you could imagine. And yet, with every step forward we make in science, culture, technology and technique, our living standards are being driven downwards, our conditions are being worsened, and our life chances, our working lives are being extended. The hours of work are being increased. The time you work when you're at work, in other words, your lunch break, your tea break, all those are reduced. You're now supposed to, even in high-tech companies, people are expected, instead of going for lunch, to go and buy a sandwich, take the sandwich back to their work desk and sit there working on the computer whilst eating. So in other words, the pressure, and they spoke this week, Karl Marx, they said. Jeremy Corbyn, he likes Karl Marx. John McDonnell, he likes Karl Marx, and therefore bad. Anything to do with Marx must be bad. But it was Marx who pointed out there is an irreconcilable antagonism between the interests of those who sell their labour power for a wage and those who live from the unpaid labour power of the worker. The same irreconcilable interest exists in your houses where you rent your apartment. In exchange for copying a key to go into an empty building and sleep in there, you have to pay for a one-bedroom apartment anywhere in Zone 1 and 2 of London at least £300 a week. And yet your earnings may well be no more than £300 a week. So in other words, the interests of the landlord and the tenant are not the same. The interests of the employer and the employee are not the same. And the reason why the Labour Party is called Labour is because it represents, or should represent, the interests of those who labour, the interests of the working class, and those people inside the Labour Party who have argued that there is a coalition of interests, that we're all in the same boat together, that the workers and the employers always the same. Tell that to any worker in a real workplace where conditions are being squeezed, where the workers are being pressurised, where privatisation compels workers to work harder, longer, faster, in order to pay interest to banks, insurance companies, pension funds, to pay stock shareholders. The idea that that is in the interest of the people is a complete farce. And what happened is, technology allowed the international capitalist class to galvanise the wealth of society into the global hands of a tiny elite for whom 4-star and 5-star hotels are their normal life anywhere in the world. Those people, if they talk to you about immigration, it's laughable. If you come with £500,000 to England, passport. Come to £500,000 to Portugal, passport. £500,000 to Germany, passport. And yet, if you're a refugee escaping from bombs dropped by the owner of one of these people, produced by one of these companies, sold to Saudi Arabia, passed on to Al Qaeda, passed on to IS, dropped on one of your brothers and sisters killed in Iraq, and then they turn around and say, we don't have the money to look after those people. The entire structure of wealth and power is designed to serve this minuscule elite, and that is what we want to break. And if we do it this election, or next election, or the election after, that is our objective. That is our determination. Our objective is to transform the balance of wealth and power irretrievably in favour of the working classes and the majority, and transfer the wealth from the minority. That's why Labour has said, it's not a wild demand. Labour Party's manifesto says any company that makes deals with the government, gets contracts from the government, will not be able to get a contract if the highest paid worker is receiving more than 20 times the wages of the lowest paid worker. That's not a revolutionary demand. It's a reform demand. But of course they're scared, because they operate on a global scale. Then they tell us, oh, we can't do that. We'll have to go abroad. We'll have to hide our money in the Cayman Islands or in Gibraltar. One of the reasons why they always go on about Gibraltar whenever this Spain conflict is because they have tax haven there. Tax haven for the elite. Tax haven for the billionaires. That's what they're after. And what Labour stands for now, which in my entire lifetime it has never done, is to transfer the balance of wealth and power back into the hands of working people, back into the hands of those who produce the wealth, and their children who invent science, technology and culture for the benefit of the future of humanity, not for a private group of individuals, but for the whole of humanity. That is why I ask you, don't vote for Jeremy Corbyn. Don't vote because of his personality. Vote for the manifesto of the Labour Party,
yes,
which is committed to transfer power to you, ladies and gentlemen,
yes,
so you can exercise control over society, monitor how the wealth of society is organised, structured, whom it serves, why it's organised that way, and so you, as a people, can determine the destiny of our society. Not a sham democracy ruled by a tiny elite where you cross a piece of paper every 4 years, but a real democracy controlled by, for the people. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you again.